Today, we're going to talk about the eye. This is a very unusual species of lemur, known for its large eyes, bat-like ears, and, most surprisingly, for using echolocation. As usual, a document with the sources for the images used, along with research papers that I found useful, will be included in the description of this video. Lemurs like the eye are primates, so let's start with a quick look at this order. This is a group that I've covered before, so have a look at my video on slow lorises if you are interested in a more thorough breakdown. Primates are, very broadly, grouped into two suborders. First, we have Strepsirrhini, which has two superfamilies, Lemuroidea, with the eye and the other lemurs, and Lorisoidea, with the galagos and lorises. The other suborder, Haplorhini, contains the rest of the living primates. This starts with the tarsiers in their own superfamily, Tarsioidea. Despite being in different suborders, the tarsiers are sometimes grouped together with the lemurs and lorises, and are collectively known as the prosimians. This is simply named as they diverged from the other primates much earlier than the later groups. These later ones are the primates that you would usually think of first: monkeys, gibbons, apes, and humans. Uncreatively, these are collectively called the simians. Well, it is actually prosimian that is uncreative, since that literally means before the simians, but you get my point. As we have just seen, lemurs are all in the superfamily Lemuroidea. If we are only considering the taxonomy, the word lemur should only be used to refer to the genus Lemur, which has the ring-tailed lemur as its only species. The animals that we colloquially call lemurs are technically lemuroids. Of course, I'm not going to call them lemuroids throughout this video. We all know what is meant by the word lemur, but it is an interesting quirk of common English disagreeing with the technical definitions. Anyway, lemurs are only found in Madagascar, but their isolation from the rest of the world has led to them being one of the most diverse groups of primates. Despite only being found in a single country, there are around 100 known species of lemur alive today, and this number only increases when considering the extinct or prehistoric species. The total number of known lemurs continues to rise as well, as genetic testing is often proving that lemurs that used to be considered a single species actually contains two or more genetically distinct species. This diversity makes it a little hard to describe lemurs, but they are mostly arboreal primates with long tails, large eyes, and a pointed snout. Many species are nocturnal, although some are active during the day. Their range in size varies from the mouse lemurs, which are about 30 grams or 1.1 ounces, to the indri, which is 9 kilograms or 20 pounds. The extinct giant lemurs were much larger, with weight estimates of up to 160 kilograms or 350 pounds. Lemurs are much more social than the other strepsirrhines. This is especially true of the diurnal lemurs, but even the nocturnal ones are considered solitary but social, often foraging in small groups at night before returning to their separate nests to rest during the day. Diurnal lemurs, on the other hand, have social systems more similar to that seen in monkeys or apes, as they live in permanent or semi-permanent troops and forage, rest, play, and groom together. In lemur social structures, females are dominant, with the lowest-ranking female still being dominant over the highest-ranking males. This is a marked difference that sets lemurs apart from not only most other primates, but also most other mammals, where males are typically dominant. How this dominance looks in practice depends on the species. For example, male ring-tailed lemurs act subserviently to the females, whether or not the female shows aggression towards them, but male crowned lemurs only back down once the female shows aggression. The superfamily Lemuroidea has 5 families of living lemurs in it. The first of these families is actually the one that we will be looking at today. Daubentonia only has one living species, the eye, so we will come back to it in a minute. Everyone seems to agree that this is the family that diverged before other lemurs the earliest, but there are disagreements on the exact placement of the other lemur families. I will follow the phylogeny laid out by Orlando et al. In 2008, but note that it is disputed by some researchers. So next we have Lemuroidea. This family contains the 26 species of sportive lemur. These are nocturnal, and their common name comes from their agility and acrobatics when moving between trees. Although usually found in trees, when on the ground they move with an odd hopping movement that is somewhat like a kangaroo. The next family is Lemuroidea, or the mouse lemurs. I mentioned these briefly earlier, as they are the smallest of the lemurs. They are also nocturnal and arboreal, but they are a large family, with 42 different known species. The family Lemuridae has a total of 21 species. Most of these are diurnal, and as a result, most of them lack the tapetum lucidum that is found in the other lemur species. This is the reflective layer in the eye that helps to improve night vision, a feature that is much less useful in diurnal animals. What is more interesting is that one species in this family, the ring-tailed lemur, still has a tapetum lucidum, despite being diurnal, and despite none of the other species in this family having it. The last family is Endreidae, with 19 living species. These are medium to large-sized diurnal lemurs and include the Indri, the largest living lemur, but also the woolly lemurs and cephakas. Alright, with the basics about lemur phylogeny covered, let us return to Daubentoniidae and the eye. The placement of Daubentoniidae within the animal kingdom has long been controversial, with wildly different speculations as to what type of animal the eye is. While today it is firmly accepted that it is an early divergence of the lemurs, historically it wasn't even considered a primate. The leading theory in the late 1700s was that it was a species of rodent, probably related to squirrels. Even back then, there were still some that suggested it could be a lemur, but classifying it as a rodent is not as crazy a theory as it might first sound. This is because one of the oddities about the eye is that its incisor teeth are constantly growing, an adaptation usually seen in rodents. Its uncertain classification continued into the 1800s, and there was even one suggestion that it was actually more closely related to kangaroos. I am not sure where this idea came from, since eyes lack a pouch and other classic marsupial features, but they did have very little information to work with at that time. By the middle of the 1800s, however, it was commonly accepted that it was a primate and probably a lemur or a closely related group. This was a status that was much later confirmed by genetic analyses. The only genus in this family is Daubentonia. There are not even any known extinct genera placed in this family. However, while the eye is the only living species, Daubentonia does also have a single known extinct species, the giant eye. Daubentonia robusta, also known as the giant eye, is the only closely related species to the modern eye. It went extinct less than 1,000 years ago, so while not especially recent, it is also not prehistoric. Despite living alongside humans, no depictions of them are known, no art, figurines, or anything else of them has ever been found. As a result, giant eyes are only known from fragmentary subfossil remains. From these remains, it does appear that the giant eye was very similar to its modern relative, aside from its size, as it was 2 to 2.5 times larger than the species of eye we have today. Their fossils have been found in the south and southwestern areas of Madagascar, which actually raises an interesting question. This is outside of the modern eye's range, and this is for a very good reason. This portion of the country is a lot drier with less forest, and so is less suitable for the eye's food, insect larvae and fruit. Since the giant eye had similar adaptations, it can be assumed it had a similar diet, so it is unknown how it managed to survive in such a different climate from the modern eye. Its extinction was likely caused by humans, either by direct hunting or by deforestation. Humans brought cattle to Madagascar around 1,000 years ago, about the same time the giant eye went extinct. To create land where cattle could graze, it was around this time where many of the forests were burnt down. This is believed to be the driving force of a mass extinction event in Madagascar at this time, and it is believed that the giant eye was one of these casualties. Okay, so returning to the main species that we will be talking about today, this is the eye, Daubentonia madagascariensis. Its unusual English name has several suggested origins. The first thing to note is that it is spelled Aye, so it's probably not related to their eyes, as large and distinctive as they are. It did used to have the English name of long-fingered lemur, but eye was first used, so the other name didn't stick and quickly stopped being used. In the 1780s, the French naturalist Pierre Sonnerat was the first to use the name, and he said it was simply a cry of exclamation or astonishment. However, more recent researchers have noticed a similarity to the name used by the Malagasy people, hai, and so suggests that the ii originated as an English corruption of this Malagasy word. Another theory is that the name stemmed as a corruption of a different Malagasy phrase, hehe, which means I don't know. The theory goes that the locals used this phrase for the ii to avoid saying its real name. I will cover this more fully later in the video, but the ii is a widely feared animal by the local people, so this theory suggests that they refused to name it, instead saying that they don't know it. Like all lemurs, iis are only found in Madagascar. They are mostly found along the eastern coast of the country, although they can also be found in the northwest. Iis are more common in rainforests, but can live in other habitats such as the dry deciduous forests. Deforestation has caused some to be found in cultivated areas that were historically rainforests, but this is not common as they can struggle to find food outside of the forests. The ii has an extremely strange appearance with many interesting features. It is the world's largest nocturnal primate. While not comparable with diurnal primates like gorillas or even the injury, it is still a decently large animal. Its head and body are around 40 centimeters or 50 inches long, and its tail is even longer, being around 60 centimeters or 23 inches long. Young iis are typically silver in color, but as they age, their fur grows thicker and becomes predominantly yellowish-brown, although they still retain silver on the tips of their ears. On their head and back, their fur often ends with whitish tips, giving them a multicolored appearance. They have large yellow eyes to help them see at night. While they have good vision, their color vision is not as good as it is in diurnal primates, but it also isn't as useful for a nocturnal animal. The other distinctive feature of the ii is its fingers. Its fingers are extremely long, but the most distinctive one is the third finger on each hand, which is noticeably longer than the other fingers. The structure of this finger is completely unique in the animal kingdom. The knuckle of this finger has a ball and socket joint. That is the type of joint that is in your shoulder and hip. It provides much more mobility than other types of joints, allowing them to move their finger in different directions. This finger is also a lot thinner than the other fingers. Finally, they also have a sixth finger, known as a pseudo-thumb, to help them grip onto branches when climbing. The ii is the only primate with a pseudo-thumb. The only other animal known to have something similar are pandas. Okay, so iis have weird hands. The question is why? Well, they can do some very unique things with their hands. The third finger is able to enter their throat through their nostril. I did say it was long and mobile. They use this to pick mucus from their nose, which they then eat. This is not the primary purpose of this finger, however. They can use these fingers for a primitive form of echolocation, and are in fact the only primates known to be able to echolocate. They tap on tree branches and trunks rapidly, up to 8 times a second, then use their large and specialized ears to hear for hollow chambers under the bark. When they find one, they will chew through the bark and then use their highly specialized third finger to extract the insect larvae that was hidden in the hollow. This feeding strategy is known as percussive foraging, and is only shared by a few marsupials such as the striped possum. Iis don't just eat insects, they are omnivores, foraging for fruits, nuts, seeds, insects, nectar, tree sap, honey, and fungi. They spend up to 80% of the night foraging, with bouts of foraging only interrupted by short rest periods. Their behavior of chewing through the bark is likely the reason for their constantly growing in sizes. This means that they don't have to worry about these being worn away or broken. This is a case of convergent evolution, where similar environmental pressures cause them to evolve a similar feature to rodents without being closely related to them. Like other lemurs, female iis are dominant, but during the breeding season, males can be surprisingly assertive. This is shown by fighting others for access to females, and can even include pulling a male off the female in the middle of mating. They are polygynous, where both males and females will have multiple mates. Female ranges never overlap, although males seem more willing to share their territory with other males. Female territories are around 8 hectares, but males have much larger ones, being up to 32 hectares. They maintain these territories by marking them with scent from their necks and cheeks. Outside of mating, males and females only interact occasionally when they encounter each other while foraging. They can mate throughout the year, and males do appear to tolerate each other unless there is a female looking for a mate nearby. Females give birth to one infant every 2 to 3 years. The time when she is caring for the infant is when females are most likely to show dominant behaviors over males she encounters. It is believed that she does this to secure better access to food for her young. The infant remains in its nest for 2 months, but it can take several more months for it to be able to climb as well as an adult. They only start attempting to extract grubs by themselves from about 5 or 6 months old. They remain with their mother until they are between 1.5 years to 2 years old, at which point they will create a nest for themselves. This long time for the development of young aye-ayes is much slower than is seen in similarly sized lemurs. Common brown lemurs, for example, are able to move through trees without their mother in less than 2 months and are fully weaned by around 3 months. Female aye-ayes become sexually mature at 3 or 4 years, while for males this is a little younger, from about 2.5 years. Aye-ayes can live as long as 23 years in captivity, but in the wild this is unsurprisingly much less, being estimated as having a life expectancy of as little as 10 years. To understand the superstitions around aye-ayes, you first need to understand a little about Malagasy culture. The local people have many taboos known as fady. While some fady are commonly held throughout the country, others can vary greatly based on the province, town or village, or even between families within a village. These fady are believed to be enforced by supernatural powers and are strongly tied to Malagasy ancestor worship, and also the belief that souls are all around. Breaking a fady can lead to becoming shunned by those who believe in it. These beliefs are so strong that even if someone, for example, wanted to start a new business venture, then they would have to make an offering to the spirits to prove that their business is not fady. Even the Malagasy word for please reflects this. It is as a fady, which literally means may it not be fady of me. While undoubtedly interesting, there is a reason why understanding fady is important to understand the place aye-ayes have in Malagasy culture. Lemurs in general have an esteemed place in Malagasy culture. Some villages or regions believe that a certain species of lemur is the ancestor of the clan, for example, and throughout Madagascar it is fady to mock a lemur or kill one in a cruel fashion. It is believed that if someone does this, the lemur's spirit will target that person to get revenge. There are many other beliefs in fady about lemurs, but the aye-aye is notable as being the only lemur that the Malagasy consider evil. Throughout Madagascar, it is believed to be the harbinger of death, and as such, locals traditionally kill it on sight. In some areas, this practice has continued up to the modern day. Different villages may have different beliefs about the aye-aye, but a commonly held belief is that if an aye-aye points its finger at someone, then that person is marked for death, and this can only be prevented by the death of the aye-aye. Some ethnic groups even claim that the aye-aye will sneak into houses at night and kill the people inside by using its long middle finger to puncture their aorta. As mentioned earlier, even its name may stem from these beliefs, with aye-aye possibly originating from the Malagasy phrase for I don't know, since the people refuse to speak its name. Killing the aye-aye is not the only action that a village might take if visited by one. Another practice some villagers believe in is that if their village is visited by an aye-aye several times, then the only reasonable response is to abandon their village and go somewhere else to build a new one. There is some hope that these long ingrained beliefs are slowly changing, or were perhaps not as universally held as we believed. A study published in 2020 surveyed villagers in the aye-aye's range to get an understanding of whether the animal was viewed in a negative, neutral, or positive light. While many villagers did view them negatively, listing many of the things I've already talked about, the researchers were surprised at the number of villagers that had neutral or even positive things to say about the aye-aye. Some people cited the aye-aye as useful in pest control, while others simply reported the neutral stance of not being afraid of it. It is unknown whether these more positive or neutral views are relatively recent, or if there has always been a mixture of opinions and beliefs about the aye-aye, but the European sources have historically only focused on the more extreme negative views. Whichever is the case, those negative views that I mentioned earlier do still exist in parts of Madagascar, and that same study found some of them during their research. But it was only around 47% of respondents, which was a much lower percentage than they were expecting, given the other literature that exists concerning the beliefs of the Malagasy people and the aye-aye. Aye-ayes are classified as endangered by the IUCN. While this isn't great, it is actually an improvement. They were believed to be extinct in 1933, but they were rediscovered 20 years later in the 1950s. In 2008, they were actually assessed to be near threatened, as it was discovered that they were much more widespread than previously believed. However, this was reversed by the most recent assessment in 2018, which reinstated their endangered classification. They did this as, although aye-ayes are widespread, their numbers continue to decline drastically. From the information you now know about the aye-aye, you can probably guess the main causes for the decline: deforestation and human persecution. Deforestation has always been a large problem in Madagascar, ever since the mass extinction that drove the giant aye-aye extinct 1,000 years ago. It continues to happen, although there are at least special reserves to try to maintain the remaining forest fragments. Outside of these reserves, however, Madagascar has lost many of its forests. The threat from human persecution should also not be underestimated. The persecution from the local people, based on superstitions and cultural beliefs, mean that people continue to kill aye-ayes on sight, or deliberately hunt it to ensure that it doesn't bring evil and death to their village or family. In theory, they are protected by law in Madagascar, but this has not changed these ingrained beliefs, and so the aye-aye continues to be killed by many of the Malagasy when they encounter it. I hope you enjoyed this video. The aye-aye is a fascinating animal, with many adaptations making it completely unique. From its size as the largest nocturnal primate, to its strange fingers and ability to use echolocation, it seems like every time I learned a new fact about them it just became stranger. It is unfortunate that it is so ingrained as evil in Malagasy culture, and if this is not changed, then it is possible the aye-aye may continue their decline and end up like their giant relative, becoming extinct. Many people and organisations are working hard to change this trajectory, however, so hopefully their declining populations will be able to recover. Thank you for listening, and feel free to suggest another group of animals you want to see me cover in the comments.